Well, maybe kind of, I guess before we talk about the kind of the foundation and the research thing, talk maybe more about your individual case of cancer. And
Well, I was diagnosed in January of 2010 with two types of cancer: follicular non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is typically slow-growing. We call it indolent, and usually don't discover you have it until it's about stage 4, and that means it's above and below the diaphragm, and it's somewhere else in your body, a distant place in your body, and also in the bone marrow. But typically, people figure out they have one in their late 60s or so. So I was kind of ahead of the curve time-wise because I was about 50 at the time. And
so
then
was it just lucky that you figured it out earlier?
Well, yeah, I guess so. Because what happened is that I had also had Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is oftentimes in younger people anyway. I know famous people like Mario Lemieux had it and was treated and then came back and still played the NHL. But it's very treatable, Hodgkin's lymphoma, if you catch it early. And that's what I was symptomatic with. I had night sweats and I started to get really skinny, and I thought it was because I was starting to run again. We had moved to England, and after I retired from track, and I'd started playing basketball, and we lived in North Carolina, Indiana, played a lot of basketball. When we moved to England, it was hard to find a good pickup game in England. So I started to run again, and I thought I was getting skinny because I was starting to run again. I didn't know it at the time, but the Hodgkin's lymphoma was really started to grow in my abdomen, and I had a lot of lymph nodes that were really large and swollen, and I became symptomatic, and I had a lot of problems. Long story short, I finally got a blood test, and the doctor freaked out and started having me tested, and then I went in for scans and biopsies, and eventually they said, well, you have two types of cancer, follicular lymphoma and Hodgkin's lymphoma. Only 4% of cancer patients have two types of cancer, but what we think happened is that the follicular lymphoma, it can transform into an aggressive type, and it transformed into the Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that's what made me symptomatic. I'd probably had the follicular lymphoma for maybe 20 years. I think I may have probably even had a couple of PRs with cancer and never knew it. This first lump I had was in 1991, and I think it was misdiagnosed as phlebitis, and it was in my groin. It was a vein that just seemed kind of lumpy. No big deal. But I think the cancer maybe was starting to manifest itself in me way back then. My running was kind of up and down, and if I got tired, I would just stay tired. I couldn't get out of it. It was very frustrating mentally. Just, I had no predictability to my training. It just wouldn't go progressively better and better. I'd fall off a cliff and just couldn't get out of it. So anyway, that's why I eventually retired. I said, well, it's not worth doing it. So anyway, in 2010, the cancer that I'd probably had for decades had spread to, 4 stages, and then transformed into the Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that's when I became symptomatic, started getting tested, and there you go, you've got 2 cancers. So I went through the chemotherapy routine for Hodgkin's lymphoma, which also helps the underlying follicular lymphoma, which I probably had a long time. Got neuropathy in the fingers, so they turn white on a cool day or even on a hard workout indoors. So once chemotherapy was done, I really couldn't catch a ball, so I thought, I can't go back to playing basketball here in Indiana. So I started running again. And, I soon got down to like 5-minute pace on my treadmill. This is 6 months after chemotherapy. And I noticed on Let's Run some guys talking about how hard it is for someone to break 5 minutes at age 50, and I was kind of chuckled. I thought, 6 months after chemotherapy, I've done it on my treadmill. I'd actually gone it en route to 1.25 miles, at 5-minute pace, and didn't think anything of it. And then later on, somebody posted, I think it was Simon Barr, the guy from Canada. He was going to raise money.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was going to raise money for, I think, the YMCA if he qualified for the Canadian Olympic team. And I thought, well, wait a second, you can raise money for a cause by running? I said, well, I'm already running. And I'd really gotten into researching exercise and oncology at that time, and I'd already started to think about forming a research fund. So then at that time I said, well, shoot, I'm going to go for the over 50 age group world record in the mile to raise awareness that we have this research fund out there, and then to show cancer patients that, look, you can still work out or exercise. You don't have to go for a world record at your age group, but get out the door and walk. If I can go and try to break the record, which I hope I'll do, then...
What's the record?
425.
Jeez. Whoa.
So...
what's your... what can you run now?
I'm probably in mid 430s, maybe low 430s shape, I think.
Are you 50? How old are you?
54. So I'm at the
And this
top.
is a 50-plus record.
Yeah. So a couple of unfortunate things. Well, fortunate, I guess. One thing is I told a friend of mine on Facebook that I was going to go for this record, so she posted that I'm going for this record. And then also my PC crashed, so I was going to send him all my records from training from January, because he's really interested in reading it. He's still, big avid runner. Well, I didn't have those records anymore, so I thought, well, now that people know I'm going for this record, I may as well start posting on Let's Run. So I went to the Over 50 Masters Training and Racing Forum and said, look, here's my story. I'm going to start posting my workouts every week. So I've done 3 weeks of workouts, or 4, I forget which, that I've posted. Every day, whatever I do, the workouts, the times, down to the hundreds, I post on there. And so today I had the scheduled workout, and I said, well, why don't I just do it when I'm down there? So, that's what today was planned. I was just going to, here's the workout I'm going to do. I sent it to you a couple weeks ago saying this is in it. And I look at it like, damn, that's pretty aggressive workout. Maybe I'll change that a little bit. But so that's why, part of coming down here was to see Will and see Aaron. Then I wanted to see our sponsor of we're not a foundation, or we're a research fund. We just want to raise money to give to researchers, and also we want to start funding scholarships for exercise physiologists who will, get their PhD or do a postgrad.
So when you say we, who's we?
Well, I have 4 scientific advisors so far. You really probably want to contact Lee Jones, Dr. Lee Jones at Duke Cancer Institute. He's a phenomenal researcher, brilliant young guy. He's a British guy. He's got some really interesting investigative research. Because as Will was saying, when I finished my treatment at my hospital, and it's a teaching hospital, I said, what do we do now? They said, you're done. And I said, what about exercise? Okay, go ahead. And it just perplexed me that they would say that. I'm like, well, what kind of exercise? And so I started getting into looking at the exercise and oncology research, and compared to sports performance, it's way behind. I would go in and you could look at how you can train and what kind of intensity and then duration or fluid replacements. There's so many studies you can find to improve your athletic performance. But you go into oncology and exercise, it was mainly predictive. If you exercise, you're going to reduce your risk of getting cancer. But as far as survivors, what kind of exercise can you do, and what is it actually doing? The research was just way behind the times. And that's not really to fault the exercise researchers in oncology. It's just that there was a study that came out in 2006 by the Institute of Medicine called From Cancer Patient to Cancer Survivor Lost in Transition. And what they determined was that they kind of forgot about cancer survivors. So this is in 2006, and once they realized, gee, we forgot about all these 9, 10, 11 million cancer survivors, we better start doing something about this large group. Then they started doing exercise research in survivors. But it's a long time to get caught up to how far sports medicine has gone ahead with exercise research. So once I saw that gap there, I saw these other researchers. I would send them emails and ask them about their research, and I had questions for them. They'd write back. They'd send me their articles. And there was a group of these guys that said, we agree there needs to be more done in exercise and oncology. So no one was doing it. And specifically what we want to do is just fund pilot studies, which are the first studies you do, maybe a couple dozen, maybe up to 60 people. You might have a theory, and then they just need financing for it. So we won't do the research ourselves. The advisors will look at the grant proposals we get, and they'll say, well, this looks like a really good, sound hypothesis and a very investigative hypothesis. And so let's go ahead and fund this guy. Of this group.
So is all the money coming from people backing you, or are there other people out doing the same thing, or is it?
Well, right now we just started in September. We just got it all set up in September, so now we got to do fundraising so that we can go ahead and fund these researchers. So then, as I also mentioned, we want to put more exercise physiologists who will specialize in oncology, because there just aren't enough of them. And I read the exercise physiology research because that's what I went to grad school from, and I read the oncology research. And I'm like, well, these are adaptations that exercise does to muscles. It might be doing the same thing in tumors, but we don't know because the exercise oncologists don't really understand exercise physiology, and the exercise physiologists don't really understand oncology, and there's just not enough cross-communication between them. So if we put some more guys getting PhDs or postdoc fellowships in exercise physiology with a specialty in oncology, maybe then these guys will be out there for decades doing research. So that'll pay dividends, you know. So that's the kind of two-pronged approach: is that get money to fund specific studies and find people who will send in a grant with a really good hypothesis and fund them, and then also put some people through, you know, higher education with an exercise and exercise oncology. So, and then Will heard about it. And, you know, I mean, he's, you know, doing some hospice treatments now, and you know, he's got a lot to deal with. But he just jumped all over and said, "How can I help you out?" And I'm like, "Well, look, you know, I appreciate it, but you know, you've got a lot on your own plate." And he just said, "No, I want to help out." So that's one thing I find is that a lot of cancer patients, they say, "Look, I want to make the people who are going to come after me, their experience better than mine, because it really is frustrating, and there's just not enough in exercise for patients to really know what to do, and there just needs to be some more research." And it's not just that it's going to. We think it can make them feel better. We think it can actually improve the treatments, and that's my emphasis on it. Like, okay, I know it's going to make you feel better, and all the studies come out saying the quality of life is better, their fatigue's less depression, all that. But I want to say, look, can you actually use exercise to improve the treatment, and will more people have better survival because of it? So, and that hasn't really been investigated very in-depthly. So that's where we're at.
Sounds good.